Well, I'm a professor here in the Department of Entomology. This bee lab, this facility we're in, is part of the Department of Entomology, but it stands in a different location. I do most of my research on honeybees, and in particular on social immunity and breeding and different behaviors of bees. Well, the disease load reduction is only part of the story. I know that's what beekeepers grab onto, but the propolis is not a cure for those diseases. It just helps mitigate a little bit. But really the benefit of propolis is the effects on the immune system and the microbiome, I think. Because having a layer of propolis within the colony, in the walls surrounding the brood and all the combs, acts like an external immune system, if you will. So it's so antimicrobial. The properties of propolis are very, very antimicrobial. They kill off all of the opportunistic or pathogenic microbes within the nest. And so then the bees' immune systems don't have to work so hard to combat those potential problems. So it's an external layer surrounding the bees that helps their immune systems not have to be activated all the time. And then because it's killing off all of these unwanted microbes, the beneficial microbes inside and on the bee's body can flourish. And those are the biggest benefits. Well, we don't really know the answer to that question. You know, you can smell propolis a long way off, right? So part of the activity comes from the volatiles, the volatile fraction of the propolis, and some of it's contact. So I think it's just the presence of it within the nest is both the contact and the volatiles are the active fractions. Well, we haven't, in this lab, we haven't seen any effect on Varroa, Nosema, or viruses. Another lab out of Europe, Sarah Leonhard and her student, whose last name is Drescher, have a study on how they think the propolis in the colony reduced the Varroa load a little bit. There's a group out of Italy that just published a paper this year that says that, you'll probably be interested in this, that said that bees are actually incorporating some of the components of propolis into the wax comb, into the brood combs. And that is reducing Varroa fertility by a little bit. None of these are, you know, by 20% or less. You know, not enough to be a treatment, but a lot of little things can contribute to bee health. So there's laboratory findings on how propolis is active against bee viruses, but we can't, one field study that showed maybe that's the case. Some people have fed propolis in a sugar solution to bees. This was in South America, and it reduced nosema. But again, feeding propolis to bees is not, that's like giving them an antibiotic in sugar syrup. That's not what happens naturally. So I know beekeepers look for, okay, what can we do for these diseases, these mites, and will propolis be the treatment for that? And the answer is no, it's not a treatment. It's one of the very essential health components to a whole colony. And having propolis in the nest keeps the bees healthier. Their immune system's healthier, their microbiome's healthier, and helps them fight diseases and maybe mites a little bit. That's a big question, but I get hung up on the word aware, because bees aren't aware in the way you're using it, right? However, They can make wax. So if they need support or to fill in gaps, why don't they just make their own wax? Why would they go out and collect this resin stuff that's so difficult for them? There's no food reward. It's very sticky, as you know. They can't really get it off their hind legs by themselves. So there's got to be some evolutionary benefit to them bringing in the resins, or they wouldn't do it. So we know, it helps fill in gaps and cavities in the nest, and it may help with humidity control and other things like that. So there could have some structural components to it that wax could probably do. But I think it's the antimicrobial properties of the resins that they're collecting that has helped bees stay healthy over millennia. And even though we keep them in boxes with smooth, planed walls inside, they continue to bring in resins or propolis and stick it in the cracks and crevices and between boxes and everywhere. So they need it. They're telling us that they need it. So we should allow them to put it where they do naturally. Well, the walls are smooth, but we've bred them to not collect very much because we don't like it as humans, as beekeepers, we don't like it. And that's, I feel, a big disservice to the bees. This is not only partly medicinal, but it's really preventative medicine for them to have this inside the colony, and we're depriving it of it because we get sticky and we don't like it. Yeah. So it makes management a little bit difficult. But if we allowed the bees to put it where they do naturally, I think it would have a huge health benefit for our bees. Yeah. I think it's okay to keep scraping propolis from between, the tops of the boxes where the boxes come together. If it's in your way, scrape it off. But that is not where they're putting it naturally. They're just trying to find cracks and crevices where to put it. So let's give them some cracks and crevices. Yeah, that'll be in that same publication. And my graduate student, Maggie Shanahan, is working with Dr. Mike Simone Finstrom from the USDA ARS lab in Baton Rouge. They're working together on writing up this publication, and they hope to submit within a month, I think. No effect on colony population, no effect in general, except that one apiary that I told you about for honey production. We see the same benefits on the immune system, the same effects on the microbiome. One thing that Mike really likes to emphasize is the stabilizing effect. So when we take all these measurements of immune system activation or something like that, you see a lot of variation, standard deviation, standard error around the mean, the average. But when you have a propolis envelope, that standard deviation goes way down, so there's less variation, like you were talking about with your cell size measurements. So what that means for the bees is there's more homeostasis in the nest. They're not wildly fluctuating like, oh my gosh, today I've got to ramp up my immune system and tomorrow I'm okay, or that's kind of exaggerated. An example I give in some of the lectures that I think helps people understand is I have an allergy to mold in the house. So in this room we're sitting in, if there was mold, I'd be sitting here sneezing. And if you measured my immune system, it would be elevated. Whatever measures you took, you would see more whatever. And if I painted the walls in this room with propolis, put a little varnish on, it would kill off that mold. So that's an opportunistic, in my hive, fungus in this case, but a microbe or a stressor. And so the propolis would kill off that mold, and my immune system then would be quieter. Okay, so that's what it's doing for the bees. Yeah, I don't know if I can come up with a human analogy. What's something that humans put in their homes all the time air purifier, a water purifier. I don't know, something like that, where it's not life and death, but if you have it, it's keeping you healthy. It's a little quiet thing that you're doing to not contaminate yourself or stress yourself. Is there anything else in our homes that sanitize? We clean our homes, something like that. That's just a general preventative health measure, right? Mm-hmm. And if we didn't let you do that, because it got in our way somehow, I mean, my analogy's gone overboard here because no one's managing you in your home, but you see what I mean? It's a component of their nest, along with wax and nectar and pollen and the water they need. The other thing they collect is resin from trees, and once it's in the hive cavity, we call it propolis. It's a beekeeper term, propolis, and we try to deprive them of an essential component or element. It just doesn't make sense. Not really. There's been a lot of good studies worldwide on interacting factors. How does the presence of a virus interact with a pesticide, in a colony of bees? Or how does one disease and a lack of nutrition, how does poor nutrition affect the disease load? Those kinds of things. I think the stressors are still the same. A lot of people put a lot of emphasis on the neonicotinoid insecticides, and yeah, that's a component to the whole equation, but I still think Varroa mites and viruses float to the top as the number one bee problems that we really need to be working on and helping the bees with. And I think they can resist these problems on their own. I know they can, because there's bees all over the world that are living with no treatments. And going back, let's see, I'm going in circles a little bit here, but what we're doing right now is we have bees that collect a lot of propolis, but we're also still selecting for hygienic behavior, which is a defense against diseases and mites. So that is a natural defensive behavior where bees are detecting and removing mite-infested brood, pupae, or disease-infested brood. You combine that with a colony that has a lot of propolis, I think that's going to be a really winning combination. So you want a colony that will have lower diseases or no diseases and lower mite loads. That's from the hygienic behavior. And then you have a colony that's just overall healthier, and that's from the propolis. And the propolis is also helping reduce some of the disease load. It's a winning combination. So I think those two traits should be bred together. They're different genetic traits. We could select for them easily. Well, I worry about their almond crop because of water shortages. I know they're diverting water to agriculture in California. I don't know how long that will last. If there's a water shortage or a disease problem in the almonds, and that's a major source of income for many commercial beekeepers, I hope they diversify their income somewhat. I also hope I hope that more begin to raise their own queen bees so that they can select their own stocks. And I've got some ideas on that I think could be doable. So that's what I worry about for the commercial beekeepers, is that they are getting their income from maybe, if it's only from almonds, because the honey prices are so low, I worry about the future of that stability of that pollination event. And I don't think it's going to be in the next 5 years or maybe 10 years, but in the long term. I would say for hobby beekeepers, they need to understand that beekeeping is not conservation, and they need to think inside, why are they keeping bees? If they're keeping them to keep bees alive, that's not a good reason because they're not really. And I can explain that more. But if they're keeping them to, maybe pollinate fruits and vegetables, trees in their gardens, that's wonderful. If they have them for a little bit of honey in their backyard. But if they're keeping them for status or thinking that they're helping the honeybee populations, it's really not the best reason to keep bees. But then I have to ask, well, are you treating your bee colonies? Are you for Varroa mites? Are you actually keeping them healthy? Or are you just putting them out there and saying, oh, I think they should be able to live on their own and I'm not treating? And then you're kind of exacerbating the problem because, especially like in the Twin Cities area, there's a lot of beekeepers. The density of honeybee colonies in the Twin Cities area is very high, although we don't really know because there's no registration for them. But there's a lot of beekeepers that don't treat their colonies, even with all of our educational abilities and everything we do, there's still a lot of beekeepers that don't treat their colonies. So a lot of colonies die every winter, and that's not helping. So our winters are long and severe, and our colonies have to have low mite loads going into winter, or they're not going to make it. So it's a big enough population to maintain a cluster. It's a surface to volume ratio question there. If your cluster's too small, you have proportionally too many bees around the edges, on the outside of the cluster relative to inside. So if you get a big enough cluster, that ratio changes and it becomes sustainable. Enough honey in there, they have to have enough honey for the bees and the size of the cluster, a young queen, and a few Varroa mites and viruses. So you have all of those things going in and the bees are fine. All of the insulation and all of that comes way second. That's not what's going to keep them alive. It's more of their health and size going in, population size. Oh, we have so many things going on here. So this lab there's two professors. I work on honeybees and Dan Caraveau works on native bees. So our whole goal with all of his employees and students and postdocs is to promote the health of all of our bees. So there's 470 species of native bees in Minnesota that Dan's lab is documenting. And we love native bees, we love honeybees, we want them all to survive. So our research and our education, our outreach, everything we do is to make sure everybody's doing everything they can to help all of the bees through planting habitat, or if they're doing beekeeping, that it's for the good reasons, for research or education or honey production or pollination. So the research projects, one of them that we're starting right now is back to hygienic behavior, which I really haven't studied in years, but we're asking the question if bees that are detecting and removing virus-infected brood, are they curtailing the spread of that virus in the colony, or are they spreading it? Because normally in hygienic behavior, if it's a bacterial like American foul brood or fungal pathogen like Chalkbrood, when the hygienic bees are removing that brood, the disease is not in the infectious stage. So they can detect that a larva or a pupa is sick, but it's in a stage of the disease development where it's not infectious. So they can yank it out of the cell and break it apart and cannibalize it even, throw it out of the nest, and it doesn't affect disease transmission. It's not contagious. Viruses are always contagious. So if you start handling brood that's full of virus, what are you doing? And I'm pretty sure it's curtailing virus transmission, but we'll be measuring that. That's pretty exciting. And we're working out the methods right now, and we'll run the full experiment next summer. Another project that I have going on right now is a big stock evaluation, I'll call it that. It's not really a breeding program because I'm not selectively breeding, but I have stocks from all over the US. I started with many, some local things, some bred stocks from the USDA ARS labs, from all over. And from the really good ones, we split them and we raised daughters from those really good colonies and put them in the splits, and we don't treat the splits. We just let them winter without treatment. I keep really careful pedigrees, so I know the parent colony and I know the daughter colony that was not treated. And we're keeping very, very close records of all the pedigrees, of all the traits of the parents. I have samples in the -80 freezer for future genomic analysis by somebody else, not me. But the goal is to, I think we're really close, of having a huge population of bees that can survive without treatment, and that I know all the traits of their parents, and from these samples in the freezer, maybe someone in the future can figure out why they're surviving. What are the traits that are allowing them to survive? So in essence, we're following the bees' lead by letting them go untreated, but I'm keeping really careful records of the parents so that I can understand where they're leading me.